Thanks so much again for tuning in to this week. Hey there, and thanks so much for tuning in again this week to Weekly by Walker, where we're really calling out those notable changes in consumer credit week over week. We're going to talk about portfolio, we're going to talk about the originations view, and then possible accommodations view. So first, let's kick it off with portfolio. This week, for the first time in several weeks, we experienced an increase for total debt, both across accounts and balances, as well as delinquency. And it's important to note the delinquency rate did remain at 0.7% now for the fifth week in a row, but we did see a slight uptick in that delinquency percentage. And you'll find that the drivers for that are first mortgage, home equity installment, and home equity revolving as well, as they experienced the rise. First, we'll look at first mortgage, where a 5%, a little over a 5% rise week over week that lands us at 0.54%, still relatively low, and a low rise also in balances and accounts of 0.2 and 0.5%. We jump over to home equity installment delinquency here. It rose 1.4%, landing at 0.93%. And home equity, the revolving delinquency and utilization, you'll see here that it rose 3.8%, landing there at 0.68%, and our utilization remained at relatively the same amount as it has over the last several weeks. Next, we'll jump into originations, where not a lot of change from last week and the previous weeks, but those recent vintages are continuing to drive higher for auto, private label, home equity revolving, and our consumer finance buckets. And so we'll take a look at those in just a second. The subprime increase we did experience this week for a couple of products, both of those being home equity. When we look at auto originations, here and recall we're showing both that Vantage score and the FICO score view in our originations reports. You'll see that the auto subprime share here decreased week over week for auto, but really pay note and attention to the balances and how those balances in the darker reds here are really, the lighter reds from the shading perspective are really trending higher than the darker reds and almost touching the points from the 1st of March. And here is HELOC, where you'll see the increase in the subprime share for HELOC week over week, and the build in the accounts, as well as for consumer finance. Here, there again, really noting the strong build in those vintages of our last 8 weeks compared to the early March time periods. Same for the FICO. And then last, we're going to touch on our possible accommodations, where we did see some movement this week and compared to week over week. It's a slight decline of 0.1%, and that was really driven by auto loans, where we saw auto loans that had been reported under the natural disaster. We saw a decline there, and overall it's now at 3.5%, whereas last week it was at 3.6%, and that decline for auto being the greatest was 0.9%. Week over week change when looking at this from an account perspective. When looking at it from a balance perspective, 0.4% decline week over week, there again driven by the auto loans, and landing at 8.6%. All of the other balances declined slightly, but auto was definitely the significant driver this week compared to last. And as always, we thank you for tuning in. And here's the contact information if you find that there is anything that you need. If you have any questions about the data that we have here, if you have any questions about any of our other data and insight products, feel free to reach out to me using my email address, telephone on the screen. And also a reminder that you can reach out to our Credit Trends website, where you can learn more information about the underlying credit trends data that you find here, as well as any of the visualizations that we have that we've built on top of this credit trends data, like most recently our credit trends economic vitality app. Happy to help and happy to talk, and look forward to bringing this to you again next week.